Hello, and welcome once again to the David Messiah YouTube channel, where our watchwords are to teach and to build back up the kingdom of Zion. The title of this talk is Negro Salvation and the Battlefield of the Mind. Negro Salvation and the Battlefield of the Mind. And how it arose was in a recent upload, I addressed the idea of the Niger coup and Haiti. And in the process of doing that, I looked at, but didn't consider at all, didn't read a poem by the poet Wordsworth, An Ode to Toussaint. And in that poem he made reference to man's unconquerable mind, and I will use that as the kickoff for this talk, and I will come back and define terms as I always try to do. So I will try to define the Negro. I will try to define very briefly. I mean, nothing sort of and I will define salvation, and I will define, and here let us look at this picture of Toussaint. This is C.L.R. James. He's a fellow that wrote Black Jacobins. I think it was the best sort of summation of that Haitian revolt that has been written. I may be wrong as to that, but certainly in the English language. And here is a picture of Toussaint. Which I like more than the usual picture that is used, because the Most High has led me to know that this is the nearest likeness to the man. Even though the artist may have taken sort of artistic license, because he seems a much younger man than the 50 years he was when that revolt started. And by the way, he does look Ashanti, so that also tallies with what I have been given, that a lot of the people there in Haiti are indeed of the Ashanti tribe, but that's for the present purpose neither here nor there. There's an interesting sort of factoid, as it were. But here is the poem, which contains the germ of the idea that is at the base of what it is I want to I want to discuss in this talk, which is a battlefield of the mind ultimately, but pertaining to the Negro. And essentially arising as a sort of a Hegelian outcome of that great victory that Toussaint. Huh? I think they're closed today, yeah. Okay, so we're coming here to it here now. Yes, Wordsworth, Ode to Toussaint, 1802. And I'll read it. Toussaint, the most unhappy of men. Whether the whistling rustic tent his plough within thy hearing, or thy head be now pillowed in some deep dungeon's airless den, O miserable chieftain, where and when wilt thou find patience, yet die not? Do thou wear rather in thy bonds a cheerful brow. Though fallen thyself never to rise again, live and take comfort. Thou hast left behind powers that will work for thee, air, earth, and skies. There is not a breathing of the common wind that will forget thee. Thou hast great allies, thy friends are exaltations, agonies, and love, and man's unconquerable mind. So this is the line to which I draw your attention, man's unconquerable mind. Because after that great Negro victory in Haiti, where General Toussaint, a slave until he was 50 years old when that uprising began, he and his Negro armies defeated in turn the royalist French, a mulatto army that came against them, a Spanish army that came against them, a British army of 80,000 that was sent against them, hoping to take that island, while France was in the throes of that revolution back in France. Remember, of course, that the French Revolution started in 1789. This Haitian uprising or revolt started in 1791, 2 years later. So it was an unintended side effect of the French Revolution. Yes, and so Britain sent out an 80,000-man strong army to take that island. Well, Toussaint and his army defeated them. And then after the revolution was concluded in France, and Napoleon had consolidated his control over France, he sent an expedition, C.L.R. James says, of about the same size as the British army that had earlier been sent, to re-enslave the Negro. Although the size of the army that Napoleon sent is kind of a little bit hard to pin it down, because it wasn't only the one expedition, there were sort of reinforcements and etc. So when you add it all up, it's hard to say exactly how big that force was. But Toussaint and his armies defeated them all. But before the end of that uprising, Toussaint had made himself available to parley with Napoleon on the mistaken belief that he shared ideology with Napoleon, that Napoleon was a white Jacobin dedicated to the principles of the French Revolution, of liberty, equality, fraternity, isn't it? And Toussaint saw himself a black Jacobin, so that he thought, okay, well, I will make common cause with Napoleon and try to see, eye to eye with him ideologically, so that there be no need for this attempt to now re-enslave the Negro. And he had been given promise of safe conduct, and that was in the end not to be, because the French forces seized him, put him on a boat, took him back to Europe, and threw him in a dungeon where he died a pitiful death of neglect and starvation. And this was the kind of fellow that Napoleon was. And we see France behaving the same way in Niger today. It is a kind of an arrogance from whence it comes, one can speculate that those who have taken control there in Niger invited the French ambassador to come and, okay, let's talk. And the French ambassador says, no, I do not recognize you as being a legitimate authority in the land of Niger, although it is clear that the people support that coup. And then when he was ordered out of the land, between himself and Macron, sort of new Napoleon, they keep on insisting that military junta that is now clearly in control of that land have no legitimate authority to expel the French ambassador. I mean, it is not only arrogant, it's kind of a diplomatic churlishness, which but anyway, let me not say more about that. Everybody to his own thoughts and his own mind as to that. But the point is, in accordance with the sort of logic of Hegelian dialectic of thesis, antithesis, synthesis, thesis here being the kind of brutal slavery that was practiced in Saint-Domingue, that land now called Haiti on one side, Dominican Republic on the other side. That was the thesis. The antithesis was this revolt, which was led, certainly in the beginning of it and for a long part of it, by Toussaint. And synthesis now is to, okay, how do we, and this is now thinking from the viewpoint of those who suffered this antithesis in terms of this revolt, in terms of the military defeats they suffered, in terms of the freeing by military force those slaves that were there and had been shackled prior to that, and who had revolted. So the synthesis was this simple idea: look, we need to kind of change the kind of we need to change the program a little bit, loosen up in terms of the brutality, number one, but number two, which was the point about the man's unconquerable mind, number two was to now try to conquer the mind of the Negro. Because obviously if you can control his mind, to put it in sort of terms, vernacular terms, his behind will follow. And if his behind then follows, then there would be unlikely, it would be unlikely that another Toussaint would emerge. Very simple idea, and this is predictable by Hegelian dialectic. So they were trying to control the mind of the Negro. And now I will talk about how they proposed to do that. But first, let me define Negro very briefly, because I did it at some length in the previous upload, but one. The Negro essentially are those people who are of the same tribal root as the Nega. The Nega being Nega David. Nega being a praise title that was applied to King David, which means that son that is watched over. And that is how he became the idea of him being the apple of God's eye, because he was watched over by the Most High. Okay, so, and that term Nega, in addition to being originally a praise title applied to King David, in itself came to mean king. And that is there in various, ancient languages. It's there, for example, in that Buddhist prophecy of the coming of a future Buddha. And they gave a name to that future Buddha, that he would be called Nagarjuna. That means King Juna. Variations as to that, Nagarjuna and so forth. But essentially, that term Nega is there. It's there in the Ethiopic Hebrew, where it's used in that expression Kebra Negast, where Negast is a sort of a plural form that means the kings. So Kebra Negast means the chronicles of the kings. And it's there in other languages, okay? So and I've addressed that quite at some length, as I said in earlier videos. So I will say no. Okay, so in its narrow meaning, Negro, with the addition of that Hebrew letter resh, which refers to the root of something, and is depicted pictographically by a head. Negro means the root, tribal root of the Nega. So the literal meaning of Negro, in its narrowest sense, is those people of the tribe of Judah, because David came from the tribe of Judah. In a broader meaning, it means those people of the house of Judah, all those tribes that were there in the southern kingdom. Well, there were only three, essentially: tribe of Judah, tribe of Benjamin, and tribe of Levi, which were there in the southern kingdom after Israel split between north and south. Okay, but in its broadest meaning, it also means all 12 tribes of Jacob, also now called Israel, because Jacob's name was changed to Israel, whether of the northern or of the southern tribes. Okay, and we all had more or less the same, phenotype in terms of dark skin and woolly hair. But the term originally did not refer to phenotypic features, it referred to a tribal bloodline. Okay, so it was simply another way of saying people who are of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, or Israel. That's what that will say. All those are Negroes by definition. Okay, so that's the definition of Negro. Salvation. What is salvation? And one in particular is Negro salvation. Negro salvation has to do with the promise made, or I should say the promises made to the children of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, which I shall take you back to beginning, that promise having been made through Moses, which essentially is that the covenant promise that the Most High made with the patriarch Abraham would be inherited by Jacob. In other words, the Negro. seem to be slightly problematic. Bear with me a little bit. I want to take you to Exodus chapter 19. Well, my Blue Letter Bible app here seems to be stuck for whatever reason. So let me just do it off the top of my mind. And this is the idea contained at Exodus chapter 19, verses 3 to 6, where the Most High called Moses up to the mountain and told Moses to tell the children of Israel, nobody else, okay, you have seen what I did to Pharaoh and brought you unto myself upon eagle's wings, reminding them of all those 10, 12 plagues that were brought upon Egypt, culminating in that final plague at the time of that first Passover, when in every Egyptian household the firstborn of man and of beast died. But all those who were of the tribe of Israel, or one of the tribes of Israel, provided they had obeyed the command to put sort of a sacrificial blood of a sacrificial lamb on the lintels and on the side posts of the doors to their houses, all those were passed over by the death angel that brought all that devastation upon the Egyptians. So that Pharaoh and his people were at that point glad to get rid of the Israelites, which they did not want to get rid of because they had enslaved the Israelites and were using them to make brick for all their building projects, and then, extracting from them essentially free labor for all those construction projects that were going on. And even after Pharaoh had let them go, he had a change of heart. He sent his army after them, his cavalry in their chariots. And at the Red Sea, the Most High did another great miracle. He caused the waves to part and open up a dry space that the children of Israel could cross over, dry shod essentially. And the pursuing Egyptian army drowned there in the Red Sea. So he proved his awesome power. And what he said that day was, if you obey my law indeed and keep my covenant that I make with you this day, I will set you high above every other nation on the planet. Thus I want you to go and tell that to the children of Israel, to the Negroes. So the Negroes are a chosen people. And chosen for what? You are to be unto me a holy nation, which means set apart nation. You are to be unto me a kingdom of priests. In other words, you are the people to whom other people would come to find out my word, my law. You understand? So this was a great promise made to the Negro. Where does salvation come into that? Salvation comes into that when we now go actually it's there stated fairly plainly in Psalms 82, verse 6, and then in verse 7, in Psalms 82, verse 6, it says, I have said, ye are gods. So this is the sort of the practical operational meaning of what it means to be that kingdom of priests. I have said, ye are gods, and all of you, and this is a reference to the Negro, that's who this is being addressed to, and all of you are children of the Most High God. So if our Father is God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and Moses, the creator of heaven and earth and all that therein is, that same God that freed the children of Israel, the Negroes, from Pharaoh when Pharaoh did not want to let them go, if he's our Father, then that means we too are gods, in essence. You understand? So if we are gods, we must have the same essential qualities of God. But we're just babies, baby gods. And in the next line we get the idea in verse 7 where it says, but ye shall die like men and fall like one of the princes. Die like men. That means men as distinct from Negro. Fall like one of the princes means that's a reference to fallen angels. Fallen angels are those who are enjoying a life eternal with the Father in a heavenly estate, but then find themselves in opposition to Father God. How? Simply by disobeying the law that he has laid down for those who are to share life eternal with him and in his presence. So they have been, they fell, they've been cast out of heaven. And they did so under the leadership of one angel named Hillel, also called Lucifer. So there was a rebellion in heaven, and all those who rebelled have been cast out of heaven. So even if now enjoying life eternal in the presence of the Most High, in a heavenly estate, that is conditional upon remaining righteous in the sight of God. And remaining righteous means obeying his law. So either as prince we can fall if we disobey, or as man if we disobey, although sort of a baby God, so to say. If as a baby God we disobey the law of God, we're never going to get invited into life eternal in his presence in the first place. But in that case we go to that other place, that warm place, given over to Hillel, to Lucifer, and we become one of Lucifer's sort of imps or followers or what have you. So that's the choice. Either serve the Most High, in which case we are invited into life eternal with him. In sort of operational terms, we become begotten sons of the Father, invited unto life eternal in his presence. And that is what constitutes salvation. And it is salvation, why? Because this goes back now to Adam in the garden. When Adam and Eve, I could get technical about Eve because her name in the beginning wasn't Eve, it was Amma. His name was Ada, and her name was Amma. So Adam is actually a portmanteau word, sort of representing both Ada and Amma, who was created out of one of his ribs. Anyway, they had been given the instruction to eat of any tree in that Garden of Eden, except that tree in the midst thereof, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, it was called. And if you eat, in the day that you eat of that tree is the day that ye shall surely die. Well, this is obviously a sort of a metaphorical kind of story. But they broke that instruction. Lucifer came in the garden and told them, no, you will not surely die. Rather, you'll become like gods. That's what he told them. And Eve saw a fruit that it looked pleasant to the eye, and certainly maybe it was smell good, and when she did bite on it, it tasted good, and so forth. So at that fall, that is when man has been dying ever since. Okay? And there's no man that has reached or crossed the 1,000-year limit, 1,000-year being likened unto a day, in terms of that instruction that had been given. All right. So man having fallen, now comes the question or the problem as to how now to raise man back up. And it is raising man back up to where he may nevertheless become again a begotten Son of God, invited into life eternal in God's presence. That is the problem of salvation. And that problem of raising man back up, that problem of salvation, was given to Eel. He was the first begotten of all those angels in heaven. And he had to come down in the flesh as Yeshua, nowadays called Jesus. And his specific name, Shua, the prefix there, Ie, is a prefix that is shared with all those in the line of Abram, Isaac, and Jacob. Okay, Jacob's name was actually Jacob. And when his name was changed to what today is called Israel, it was to Ie Sharalo, where the suffix there, Sharalo, means the prince is here. Okay, which identifies him as that chosen one, who indeed has that task and indeed that privilege of being a set-apart people, okay, who children of God, who, if they accept the terms that have been set, may become begotten sons of the Father, invited unto life eternal with him. And if that is accomplished, then in that sense they enjoy salvation. So that's what salvation is. Okay, so the title of this talk is what? Negro Salvation and the Battlefield of the Negro Mind. And the idea of a battlefield is that there is an enemy who does not want us to attain to that state of salvation. That's what it's about. Now, we brought it upon ourselves because he gave us the formula, so to say, under which we would attain unto salvation. It's a very simple formula. formula is obey the law of that holy covenant that he gave us there through Moses upon Mount Sinai. If ye will obey my voice, my law indeed, I will set you as a people high above all other nations, all other people on the planet. And you shall be priests unto me. More specifically, ye shall become begotten sons and daughters unto me, invited into my presence, invited unto life eternal in my presence. So that if we then become gods in that sense, grown up gods, then we get to do what gods can do. That is the whole point of this schoolhouse earth, because this earth is a schoolhouse. Okay, so now comes the battlefield of the mind. Why? Because when we disobeyed that law of the Holy Covenant, which is sort of mirroring what Adam and Eve did in the garden, he brought an enemy against us, that enemy being children of the line, Abram, Isaac, and Esau. Esau was that wicked twin of Jacob. Essentially wicked, because Scripture lets us to know he made a pact with Satan. Because Jacob was given the dominion, but Esau also was given the dominion. But there was a rider in the case of the dominion given to Esau, which was number one, that he would live by the sword, which is a kind of a code word way of saying that he would make a pact with Satan. And we get that clearly if you read the sealed book of Moses, which is not there in the so-called Holy Bible, the 66 books. It's not there even in the books of Apocrypha, which had been left out of the so-called Bible. This is yet another book that's outside, that's related to the Book of Mormon. I won't go into a digression as to the Book of Mormon, only to say that there was another sort of congregation brought over to the other side, to the Americas, which was promised land as opposed to inheritance land, because we were scattered out of the inheritance land, and the Negro was scattered into all kinds of lands all over the world, indeed into every kingdom on the earth. And in some of those were promised lands unto us, in the sense that we became the aboriginal people of those lands, and those lands belong to us. So that includes the Americas, it includes all those lands down in the South Pacific. It included far Western Europe, Northern Europe, Eastern Europe, the Far East. It included essentially all those lands that had not been divided up among the three sons of Noah in the beginning. The lands that were divided up among Shem, Ham, and Japheth at Jubilees chapter 8, because they had all come down when the ark rested upon one of the mountains of the chain, the Mount Ararat chain. All of them went down into that land today called Mesopotamia, the land between the two rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates. And as they grew in population, they decided, okay, we need to sort of divide this land up amongst ourselves. So in that division, Ham got the hot lands to the south, Japheth got the cold lands to the north, and Shem got the lands in between. and it was all demarcated by various rivers and so forth. But it by no means extended to all of planet Earth. Because we know when at the time of the Assyrian captivity, when that first expulsion took place, the northern tribes were scattered out of that land, and they made a promise at that time, because they were scattered, and it's there recorded in the book of 2nd Ezra chapter 13. That story is there in verses 40 to 45, roughly. And specifically at verse 41, where it says, they went to lands where never before mankind dwelt. And those lands became promised lands to them because they were guided. The Most High stilled the sea, stilled the storm, so that they could get over to wherever they were going. And they didn't all go to the same place. So again, some came to the Americas, some went to Western Europe, Northern Europe, some went down into the South Pacific, and some went down into Africa. But that part of Africa where never before mankind dwelt, because part of Africa had been taken up by Ham. Ham had populated the Nile Valley, had populated North Africa, up to a point. Okay? So in that sense, what today is called Sub-Sahara Africa also became promised land of the Negro. We were scattered down into that land. We didn't sort of emerge out of that land, in the sense of Big Bang kind of silly ideas of cosmology. Okay? All right. So salvation, Negro, salvation on the battlefield of the mind. Okay. So Esau, at some point, assumed the dominion. For all practical purposes, it was what was prophesied by the prophet Daniel there in chapter 7, that there would be 4 kings that would arise, kings of the Gentiles, or kingdoms of the Gentiles that would arise. And at the end of that is when the dominion would revert to Jacob. So those 4 kingdoms of the Gentiles would be Esau taking the dominion, ruling by the sword. In other words, ruling with craft, having made a pact with Satan. Okay? So he is the one that was down there in Haiti, Esau, because Esau was the white slave master. Okay? And the Most High raised up Toussaint and the other generals like Jacques Dessalines and all those former slaves who were brutalized enough for them to say enough is enough. And so they revolted. And having revolted, then defeated all these armies, the greatest armies of the day. So this is again now what is happening today. The Negro over there, certainly at the beginning here now in Francophone Africa, have said enough is enough, because the erstwhile colonial power France never really left. They, as part of a grant of independence, quote unquote independence, because it really has not been independent, put codicils as part of a pact, essentially for the continuation of the colonial enterprise, under which France not only controlled the currency, not only required that reserves be kept by the Minister of Finance of France, but also required that these Francophone countries leave their countries open to continuing now neo-colonial raping, rape, pillage, and plunder in terms of access to resources. So that in Niger, up until this coup, France was extracting from that land uranium ore and paying them only 5 cents on the dollar for the market value of the ore. Extracting gold and essentially doing the same thing, so that France, even though it has no domestic gold production, is now the 4th largest holder of gold in the world. And Niger, which is supplying it with gold, have no reserves of gold to speak of. You understand? So enough is enough. Enough is enough. And so the revolt in Haiti was a sort of a portent for what is happening today in Francophone Africa. And after that revolt in Haiti, 1791 to 1804, part of their Hegelian response has been to try now to control the mind of the Negro. And as I said, it was being discussed out in the open. And this is what prompted that poem by Wordsworth. And even 80 or so years later, my own forebear, sorry. John Jacob Thomas in 1889, in a book entitled Fraudacity, which was a response to a book by a former pastor, I think his name was Anthony Froude, in which he discussed Froude, that is, ways to sort of essentially control the mind of the Negro, which we gather clearly from this quote from my forebears. And he's 5 generations away from me in my direct line. This book was, or rather, he was the first published full-blooded Negro author out of my land, Trinidad. There had been a mulatto fellow who published before him about 30 years earlier. But here is the quote: "No, sir. In the name of the being regarding whose existence you and your alleged, quote, popular thought, unquote, are so painfully in doubt, we protest against your right, or that of any other created worm, to formulate for the special behoof of Negroes any sort of artificial creed unbelieved in by yourself." And we saw the same idea as was there in the United States as well, the idea of the slave Bible, which was a kind of a bowdlerized Bible in which they took out all the inconvenient parts that would let the Negro to know who he was, and that he was that fellow there in the Bible that Moses was talking about and talking to. You understand? So this program of now trying to conquer the mind of the Negro. Now I leave the mind as a sort of an undefined concept, except to say, well, the mind is prior to and exists or continues to exist after the decease of the body. After that brain, turns to worm and turns to earth again, dust to dust, ashes to ashes. Okay, the mind still exists, and that's how we can be judged on Judgment Day. Because when those angels who were given the task to record all our deeds and even all our thoughts, while in this mortal coil, so to say, when the record of our deeds and doings and thoughts are replayed before us, yeah, we will remember. But that will have nothing to do with the brain. The brain is just a sort of a material organ, okay, with which the mind works, no doubt. But the mind exists prior to and will survive, so to say, the decease of the body and of the brain. So I'll only say that. In any kind of system of thought such as this, there's some things that have to remain undefined, and we simply have to put it to the person, the listener, that it's like how do you describe the redness of a rose to somebody who's blind? You can't. But to one who has seen a rose and knows, the red rose, and it comes, of course, in different variety, you just need to make reference to the red rose, and they kind of know what you're talking about. So in the same way, I simply assume that we all know that which is called the mind because we all have one. And the idea of the battlefield of the mind is trying now to get into one's mind to make them think, as they alluded to in that quote from my forebear's book, Fraudacity. Make them to think things which are convenient for the one that is now trying to keep us under boot. Because with Esau exercising the dominion, he in effect has been given license to put his boot upon our neck. Just as France was given license to put their boot upon the neck of the people there in Francophone Africa. And indeed everywhere where there is so-called overseas French territory, whether it is Guyana, there in South America, whether it's Tahiti down there in the South Pacific, and there's Martinique and Guadeloupe in the Caribbean. Those are overseas French territories, which are not even considered colonies, they're considered departments of France. But it's a colonialist kind of a situation all the same. And their boot is upon the neck of those people who are there, who are not per se French, you understand? They're French by some kind of constitutional writ, but they're not French by blood. Okay, and a lot of them are Negro, certainly in Martinique and Guadeloupe, and also in Guyana down there, and also in Tahiti. So Negro salvation and the battlefield of the mind. Now, what are the sort of dimensions structurally of this battlefield, or strategies that can be applied on that battlefield? Well, there are three main dimensions that I would suggest. The first and overriding one is that battlefield of cosmology. Cosmology, which is, if you like, the logic of the all, and how everything in creation, kind of all how everything interrelates with every other thing. And allied with cosmology is also the idea of cosmogony, how it all came about, from where it came about and how it came about to what it is that we have now. And the Most High has given us a cosmology. It's there in the book of Genesis. It starts out there, Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. That's the outline of a very simple but nevertheless cogent cosmology. In the beginning is a reference to time. God created heaven is a reference to space. And earth is a reference to matter. So you have time, space, and matter in that sentence. But more than time, space, and matter in that sentence, you also have an idea of something that was there before you had time, space, and matter. That made time, space, and matter to spring into existence. And that idea is the idea of mind. Because mind had to have preceded time, space, and matter. Why? Because it is out of mind that we have the faculty, the quality of will, and even prior to will, we have the faculty of consciousness. And in particular, the faculty of being conscious of being conscious. And it is only if you're conscious of being conscious that indeed you can now have will. And out of will you may say, well, all right, let there be light, and there was light. And if you say, let there be light, which is a vibration, and we know that for sure, there are physics experiments that will settle that. If you have vibration, vibration only can only be in an existential sense if there is space within which it may be. And only if there's some kind of a substance, material substance, however ineffable, within which that vibration also may be. And if it's a vibration, then that presupposes time. And indeed vice versa. Time presupposes vibration. And vibration sort of implies time. Because vibration there has to be a beat, isn't it? A count. And if you have a count, just as in music, you have time that is sort of embedded in the vibration. So that time, space, and matter cannot even be imagined without the prior existence of mind. And in particular, the sort of, those ideas of mind, of consciousness and the will. It takes will now to bring about existence, isn't it? And that is there also there in the second verse of Genesis chapter 1, where it's I can't bring it up for whatever reason, but there talks about and the earth was without form and void. Well, if there was no form, that means there was no quote unquote matter. And that is there also in the word void. But there is consciousness present. There is mind present. And there is will present. And all of that is there in what is called, today is called Kabbalah, which is not the right word in terms of the Paleo-Hebrew, for what is also called in English the tree of life. The proper word is Gawalat. But I've dealt with that in earlier uploads. The point is that in that conception, there is a fairly sophisticated cosmology that is developed. And in that idea of the tree of life, that Kabbalistic tree of life or Gawalatistic tree of life, there is this notion of God in his essence above the tree of life, and that is in a state prior to this world that has come into existence. I say this world because an essential cosmological idea that has to be associated with God is that he has no beginning. And if he has no beginning, you cannot put a time limit on when any aspect of his creation would have come into existence. So even the idea that this world, this universe, started 20 billion years ago, or 15 to 20 billion years ago, as is claimed under the what's it called, the Big Bang Theory, is uninsightful because they don't understand the nature of the God that has created this world. And if this world, there were many other worlds prior to and will continue to be created in future worlds, which is why now he is creating a batch of gods in this world. And those gods are Negro people who may be called upon to create yet other worlds in the same kind of a way in which this world was created. And if the earth was without form and void, referring to that state before there were things in the world, we again are implying and assuming the existence of mind, of consciousness, and of will prior to any material substance of the world that then was created. So the whole physics project, which continues to sort of hold on to that fixed idea that goes back to Democritus, that Greek fellow, that had the idea of the atom, which is the smallest discrete building block particle of material existence of nature. The idea that you could sort of keep, splitting and splitting and splitting any piece of material substance until you get to the atom when you cannot divide it anymore. And so that fixed idea was taken to the limit, and yes, something like what they now call the atom was found. But then once they found that atom, they found, okay, well, we could go inside that atom and look at how it is structured. And so now came other particles, proton and electron and neutron and so forth. And there was some certain logic to that kind of a structure. But then they could go further and sort of split the neutron or split the proton or split the electron. So yet other particles would come up, and quarks and muons and mesons and etc. and etc. And they found that, well, really there's no end to these quote-unquote particles. They need ever bigger, ever more expensive, what do you call them, super colliders, where they well, you know what they're doing with better than I, because there's so much nonsense there going on. This whole idea of particle physics, looking for the ever smaller building block of nature, so to say, which was that idea that goes back to Democritus. But in terms of the cosmological idea given to us by our Creator, we may confidently state that mind existed as a non-material entity before any material facet of creation. And it is out of mind and vibration that we get the illusion, really, of material substance, of material solidity. So from mind we may get, quote unquote, material substance, but trying to go the other way of taking material substance and trying to sort of shave off ever finer pieces or particles of material substance to now try to get back into God's mind, you can't do it. That's an impossible dream. That is quixotic. Not even Don Quixote with Sancho Panza could have success in that endeavor. But that is how physics has gone down this, proverbial garden path, looking for, ever finer particles. That's particle physics. It's worked out very well for them because these super colliders require billions of dollars. So somebody gets a big rake off of those billion-dollar projects. Okay. I say that to say that this is now the fundamental ideology where if you start off with the wrong ideology as to cosmology or the wrong idea as to cosmology, then you're not going to, I'm talking now about the Negroes, then you are not going to sort of fall under the instruction that he gave to our forefathers through Moses at Mount Sinai. Because you're not going to sort of, because out of that kind of Big Bang ideology, you have the idea that the world is only one, and it created a fixed point in time ago. So in other words, in time it's finite, 15 to 20 billion years old. And it is all material in terms of how it is conceived and defined. And if it is all material, And then out of that comes the earth, which is 4 to 5 billion years old. And there is some kind of a sort of an evolutionary process to go with that original Big Bang, okay, to where we go from stardust to material solidity and whirling bits of planets and stars and so forth. That there comes a point when, the first sort of elements of life kind of emerge. And out of life emerges further ideas of consciousness. And out of, consciousness sort of implies mind. So they're trying to go from matter to mind. When the Most High has given us very plainly that no, we go from mind to matter. Not from matter to mind. You can't go the other way. So we also then have the wrong idea, and they foisted that upon us. Some of us, keep parroting this nonsense that man emerged out of Africa, okay, and through some kind of evolutionary process, we started off in terms of our, the first hominid, and they use these terms and throw them around that have no real meaning. Hominid, and from hominid we get some kind of Homo sapiens, and then out of Homo sapiens we get some kind of Homo sapiens sapiens. All a lot of nonsense. And we could talk about hominids, being over 200,000 years old. They emerged out in the Rift Valley and blah 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 blah. Nonsense, complete nonsense. What we have is we came out of Adam. Adam was formed out of the dust of the ground, yes, but by a designer who knows how to do it. And that was only 6,009 years ago. But if you accept that kind of cosmological ideology of Big Bang and evolution therefrom, then the idea of Adam in the garden becomes like a nonsense to you, because the two don't sort of cohere. Either one is wrong and the other right, or the other right or wrong and the other one right. Because we know man is here. We if you're listening to this, you are a man or a woman. Okay, so that part of it is not in question. The question is, where from do we come? And for how long have we been around? And the Most High lets us to know that there has been a process where there's male, there's female, and there is, procreation through the coming together of male and female, and that is sort of corroborated by scientific now discovery of the DNA molecule, and taking one strand from the male, another strand from the female, and so from father and mother you get an offspring, could be male, could be female, but that shares features of both the mother and the father. And we don't really care the land mass in which we may be having a sojourn, because that is not what determines our identity. If you take a Negro descended from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, because that's what defines a Negro, and you take him from anywhere in Africa where he may be, for the moment, having a sojourn, might have his parents there, and now you send him over to the Americas, he's still a Negro. Send him up to Eskimo land, he doesn't become an Eskimo, he's still a Negro. Because your identity is in the blood, it's in the DNA. It's not in any landmass where you or your foreparents are having or may have had a sojourn. So any kind of idea emerging out of Big Bang that Africa was the origin and we are African and so we are the first people on the planet and everybody comes from us, this is all nonsense. That's not what it is. We are in Africa today because we were scattered out of that inheritance land there in what is being occupied by the so-called Israelis. Because we disobeyed, and in various waves, first the northern tribes were scattered out around 720 BC, 722, and then starting around 606 BC with the first invasion of Babylon upon Jerusalem, then the southern kingdom tribes also were scattered out. And in various waves because we didn't all go into Babylon. So that when Yeshua came around 3 or so BC, there were still lots of Negroes there in the land now called that was then called Judea as a Roman province under occupation. But there was another big scattering in 70 AD under who were they again? That emperor and the general. I forget their names. But that's discussed at length in the book by Rudolph Windsor. So we were scattered out of that land into every every kingdom on the earth. And in some cases, we then became the aboriginal people of some new promised lands, including what is now sub-Saharan Africa, including what is now the Americas. We were there first. There was a Mongolian invasion around 1200 or so BC, 1200 AD. At the height of the empire of Genghis Khan. He sent an expeditionary force over to the Americas. There's a book written by John Rankin as to that. And that's how come Mongolian seed line was injected into the Americas, which was originally Negro seed line. And that was what Columbus saw when they came over here about 200 or 300 years after that Mongolian invasion. They saw some people who looked Mongolian, some people who looked Negro, and then you had mixed people, Mongolian and Negro mixed. The Caribs that were here in this land now called Trinidad were a mixed people. Mongolian paternally and Israelite or Negro on the maternal side. In the case of the Aztec there in Mexico, the Mongolians took over from the Negro kings that were there. But they had to marry in with the Negro females because the invading expedition didn't bring too many females with them. Same with the so-called Incas down there in Peru. In the case of the Maya, over there more to the eastern side, who didn't have that direct encounter with the Mongolian expedition, the Negro paternal bloodline remained in charge, the Maya people there. But because of how these things work, they also have gone through a mixing process because up, it's a spread. It's like you start a fire in one place, it will burn as long as there's fuel to burn. So people in their normal kind of meeting will mix. So the Maya people are today a mixed people, but on the paternal side, it is a Negro. You understand? Okay, so I'm saying all that to say, in the battlefield of the Negro mind, the first thing they're going to try to do is to have us not understand that basic cosmology that is outlined at Genesis chapter 1, supplemented by the much more detailed cosmology that you find in a full unfolding and exposition of that tree of life concept. Even the idea of the tree of knowledge versus the tree of life, that concept has somehow gotten misunderstood or lost. I won't go into it here now because I've dealt with it in some earlier talks. Okay, so that's number one, cosmological ideology. If you get that wrong, then the rest will not follow. Because what has the Most High given us? He's given us a law. He's given us do's, he's given us don'ts. We're supposed to do the do's and refrain from the don'ts. And if we do that successfully, that's the precondition now to him making us a begotten son or daughter of his, invited unto life eternal. If we can't do the do's he's given us, or won't, or can't refrain from the don'ts he's given us, or won't, that is where now we would either die like men or fall like one of the princes. He told the princes, look, I want you to watch over the earth and its people. Well, they were watching and they saw a lot of these beautiful earthly women, and they decided, you know what, let lust prevail. And so they actually, they even formed a kind of a covenant amongst themselves at Mount Hermon, that they would come down and take for themselves wives, all whom they would. So having disobeyed, they were cast out of heaven. Very simple. So any mistaken ideology that leads us now to disobey the do's and the don'ts given to us by the Father will lead exactly to that result, that we die like men or fall like one of the princes, meaning we do not attain to that graduated state of becoming a God in the presence of God, well licensed and able to create yet more worlds like this one, or even not like this one. We don't know. So cosmological confusion is the first one. The second, which sort of more or less derives out of cosmological confusion, is religious confusion, which is, call it religious ideology. That is a sort of a sub-battlefield. Because religious ideology is now where, instead of doing the do's and the don'ts, or doing the do's and refraining from the don'ts, given to us through Moses by the Most High, we now are persuaded to do something different. And this is what Christianity has brought to us. They've taken our books, written by our forefathers, for our guidance, and using our books written by our forefathers, which describe these do's and don'ts, but long before those do's and don'ts, it also describes history. It also describes cosmology. It tells us who and what we are as entities, as part of God's creation. But they take our books and now they misnomer it the Christian Bible, getting it wrong from the get-go because they say Jesus is the Christ, is the Messiah. And that is a mistake from jump. Because, and I proved it in the last upload, Revelation chapter 2 verses 26 and 27, from which it is crystal clear that it is Yeshua whose job it is to raise up that one to wield the rod of iron. Who is that Mashiach? So if he's raising up the Mashiach just means Moshe, which is the name of Moses, plus Ak. Ak means, a friend or a brother. It's depicted by that Paleo-Hebrew consonant Ket, which pictographically is depicted by the outside of a tent. So you can have a brother who is living in the other tent. A brother in the sense of, okay, he's your friend. It could also mean a brother of another mother. Okay, so it can also mean the idea of, so Moshe Ak is like that other Moshe, that Moshe over there, or that Moshe that is now being raised up, as distinct from that original Moshe. You understand? That's what Moshiach means, which also is translated in the English as through the Greek as Christ, the Anointed One. Well, if Yeshua is the one raising up the Mashiach, raising up the Christ, then he himself cannot be the Christ. It's a simple thing. So they off on the wrong foot from the beginning. But once they have you believing a nonsense to start with, they can also have you believing the nonsense that does matter. And it's there in Daniel chapter 7 verse 25. He shall think to change times and laws. He shall wear out the saints. He shall wear out the Negroes, meaning he will torture them and slay them and reduce them down into captivity. But he changing times and he changing laws. If you are changing times and laws, you are Lucifer. You are Luciferian. So one of the ideas of Lucifer was he thought he was brighter than God. He thought he could do a better job than God. He thought he more righteous than God. So in changing times, now we no longer have the calendar that is basic to one of to the set of dues. Because we're supposed to keep the Shabbat, we're supposed to keep all the set feasts. That's basic. And if we're not keeping the set feasts, we're not making it into the kingdom. We're not going to get the salvation that we seek. So with the calendar that was brought in by the Christians, we can't even find those set feasts anymore. And out of the list of don'ts, we have quite a few don'ts, including don't do what the heathens do, don't do what the Gentiles do, which is to erect and bow down to and worship idols. And included in that is a prohibition against the feast of the Yuletide feast of what today is called Christmas. But we're doing that. We're not supposed to be doing Easter, which is another set of pagan feasts in honor of a pagan deity called Diana, called Eostre, called Ishtar. We're doing that what we're not supposed to do. And this is brought us by so-called Christianity. But it is what Esau now has done in terms of religious ideology, with the intent on the battlefield of the Negro mind of getting us to do exactly what the Most High said not to do. And then not doing what he said to do. And that is the same for every other man-made religion. Islam is doing the same, and Islam is part of that. Psalms 83 lets us know that there was that. And confederacy, an active, what today we call conspiracy, by those tribes round about, headed by Esau, but including Ishmael, who brought us Islam. One of the things that came out as I was, looking at the coup in Niger is that 99% of the Negroes there in Niger are Muslim. That means they're followers of Islam. That means that they think that Muhammad is a prophet, indeed the last prophet, after the line of Moses. Well, if you go to the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 18 and verse 18, you find, according to what it says there, by what Moses says there, the prophets that shall be raised up by the Most High shall be of our brethren, will also be Negro, will also be of the line of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He's not going outside of that line, because we are that nation of priests and a holy people unto him. He's not going outside of that. So if you are following Muhammad, thinking that he is being guided and bringing instruction from the God of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Moses, that's a lie. And if you follow the precepts of Islam, then again, you're not going to be doing the do's and refraining from the don'ts that the Most High has given us. Because you're not going to be keeping the Shabbat, that's number one. And you're not going to be keeping the set feasts, that's number two. And even though, yes, they do say, well, we're not eating the pig, well, good for them. They go by halal. But there are all kinds of other things which are not halal for us, but is halal for the Muslim. I think there's no prohibition under Islamic law against shrimp, for example. So the battlefield of the Negro mind turns strategically upon ideologies. Basic ideology being of cosmological sort. Who are we and where we came from? The next ideology being of religious sort, as to the do's and the don'ts that would get us unto salvation. And then there's another battlefield, which is political ideology. Because yes, indeed, there is. If you make certain sort of assumptions as to our cosmological origin and identity, then certain political kinds of ideologies tend to flow. For example, if you have a political ideology that came out of, say, the French Revolution, that inspired them to not only overthrow the rapacious bourgeoisie, who were very profit-minded, but also to go beyond that and to guillotine the king. Because you following a political ideology concocted by the learned elders of Zion, named after the Jacobin Club, which they gave that name essentially to themselves, where they concocted this political ideology of liberty, fraternity, and equality that they themselves did not believe in. And that's clear from the book I quoted the last time, Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion, okay, using a kind of a tried and true sort of set of formulas that they're still using today through George Soros Foundation, color revolutions, and so forth, where they have perfected the art of bringing down kings, bringing down governments, when those kings and governments are not playing ball with them. Then they will have you again going against the laws of the Most High. And specifically, under the laws of the Most High, he says, we the Negro are a holy, set-apart people unto himself. We are to be a kingdom of priests unto him. Priest is an intermediary between man and God, which means it's the other nations that must come to us to learn about themselves, to learn about who they are cosmologically and in their relationship with God. Not the other way around. But if they have sort of, have the initiative, so to say, arising out of roughly 3,000 years of exercising the dominion under which they have kept the Negro under their thumb, under their boot, with that battlefield initiative, yes, they can be the ones who we think are now the priests. But they control the Catholic Church. They control what they call Judaism today. Okay? And they give themselves titles like reverends and bishops and pastors and apostles and etc. and etc. And rabbis, did I say rabbis already? And some of that kind of ramifies in political ideology. And the biggest sort of snare and delusion as to that is this idea that we are all equal. Politically before the Lord, and this is the sort of, the idea that is there animating the idea of democracy and all these constitutional democracies or constitutional democratic republics advocated, whether it's under Fabian socialism, whether under Marxism, whether under communism, whether indeed under liberal democracy of the West or what have you, we have this idea, well, we're all created equal. The only thing is that it's not really so, as that fellow put in his book, Animal Farm, where all the animals in the farm are equal, except that, hey, the pigs are more equal than all the others. Well, it's the same. We have the illusion of a kind of equality in terms of the democratic institution. But in reality, if you have the George Soroses of the world around casting their weight around, you soon find out, well, no, this isn't a real democracy at all. Even when they do these color revolutions, which seem to be an upswelling of the people from the ground up to get rid of unpopular regimes, it's all manufactured. It's not real. You understand? So, whether it be cosmological ideology, whether it be a religious ideology, whether it be political ideology, these are all used by the enemy. Those Confederates, Psalms 83, Esau, Ishmael, Moab, and Ammon, and so forth, to keep the Negro far from fulfilling the requirements that have been set under which we may obtain salvation, under which we may become begotten sons and daughters of the Father, and under which we may be invited unto life eternal in His presence. Okay, now I've asked before starting this talk, well, Father, how many of us, are indeed failing in that regard? And he said easily 99%, more than 99%. Okay. No question about it. But in His mercy, He is going to set it up so that 2/3 of us will be cut off and die, so to say, because we've simply failed to come back, to the understanding that He requires of us, to come back that knowledge that is there on tap. All we have to do is seek it. But most of us do not, because we stay trapped, defeated on that battlefield of the mind. We got trapped by cosmological nonsense that they call Big Bang and evolution. We get trapped by religious nonsense they call Christianity, they call Islam, and all the other religions. They've done the same with Buddhism, they've done the same with, you name the religion. If the Negro gets into it, it's a trap. And political ideology, where again we have this trap, wherein we think, well, the Negro ought to be the same as everybody else. Wherein for us it's a victory for the Negro just to be equal. But if you look at Scripture, it becomes very clear that equality for the Negro is not an option. Why? Two possibilities. Either we obey the law of God or we don't obey the law of God. If we obey the law of God, we're going to be set high above every other nation, in which case there's no equality. And if we disobey the law of God, the Scripture says even the stranger in our midst would rise up high above us. So again, there's no equality. So equality is a snare, it's a delusion. Whether it is part of our political ideology, which is a dangerous one, because that's sort of, if we swear an oath to uphold a constitution that talks about, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, blah, blah, blah. Or here every creed and race finds an equal place, blah, 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 blah. Then we are lost from the beginning. Because we've sworn this oath now. to our Constitution. And if we've sworn this oath, that puts us what? We're supposed now to uphold this. And if we don't uphold it, then we have to answer to the Father, isn't it? So, political ideology can get us, lost. Religious ideology can get us lost. Cosmological ideology can get us lost. And if we're wrong as to cosmological ideology, then we're probably going to be wrong as to religious ideology and or political ideology. Now, there are other little sub-battlefields around, but those are the main ones. Those are the main ones, yeah. But he told me, look, over 99% are failing in this regard. But he will have 2/3 of us cut off and die in this day. And 1/3 he will bring through the fire and try as gold is tried or silver is tried in the fire. So we're going to be tested. And he made it clear that even to become part of the 1/3, he's looking for those who are without iniquities, so to say, in their heart, who are without deceit or deceitfulness in their heart, who are without lies in their mouth. You understand? That's who we're looking for. But if you are sort of unregenerate and unrepentant, you caught up in the things of this world, you following the devils that have now been let loose, LGB, etc. You're following this or that religious ideology to the point where you're not even going to listen to the servants and the prophets that the Most High is sending out in abundance in the latter day. But you're listening instead to the charlatans that are keeping you far from the do's and don'ts that Moses gave us, making it impossible for you to meet the condition that the Most High has set for our salvation. Well, all right, now you go with Lucifer, because it is Lucifer who is the author of these ideologies that are calculated to keep you far from salvation, to keep the Negro far from salvation. It is your soul that Lucifer wants. Okay? Because the ones who are not Negro, he already got them. Now, there may be a few non-Negro. The scripture says the stranger will be joined with them. Yes, so there will be some who will be joined with the Negro, looking to find the same salvation that the Negro is promised if he would keep the law. Indeed, some of them might keep the law better than ones who are a bloodline, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, no question. But those people there who are calling themselves Jews, who are not, because the Most High knows them, knows the blasphemy of them who say they are Jews and are not, but are the synagogue of Satan. Some of them actually, in terms of the do's and the don'ts, they seem to be keeping the law better than we are. But their whole religion, which is now called Judaism, is based on an essential lie and on an essential fraud. And that lies that they are bloodline Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Judah, when they are not. Or Levi, some of them call themselves Levi. When they are not. So, what will happen to them? I can't say. But if the Most High says they are of the synagogue of Satan, that is essentially saying that they've got a Luciferian kind of a creed from which they're proceeding. It's also in Daniel chapter 11, verse 14, I believe. Those are they who would think to pick up the vision, but they shall fall. You cannot, it's a case of identity theft. Now, most of them who are the sort of the rank and file Jews, that's what they're being taught, so that's what they believe. But the higher ranking rabbis, I think they know very well that they are not of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Judah. Because their own historians have told them, who also researched the matter. The book by Shlomo Sand called The Invention of the Jewish People. The book by Arthur Kessler called The 13th Tribe. That's just to know where they came from. They are a Japhetic tribe, basically. And those of the line of Japhet were polluted by fallen angel seed line. That's Gog and Magog. The son Magog was one of the sons of Japhet, nominally, but was actually of the bloodline of a fallen angel named Gog. He and also another brother named Tubal. I got that information later. So that's why the children of Japhet became pale of skin. All of the children of Noah, Ham, Shem, and Japhet, were originally not pale of skin. But Japhet's children became pale of skin because of the fallen angel infiltration, pollution. Canaan would have suffered the same thing because we know there were giants in the land of Canaan. And the children of fallen angels tended to have two traits. One was giantism and the other one was paleness of skin. So if the Canaanites had a lot of giants among them, that is the evidence that they too were infiltrated or polluted by fallen angel seed line. It's interesting that there's a people in sub-Saharan Africa, in what is today called South Africa, called Hottentots at one point, and I think nowadays they call Khoisan people. What I came to understand through inquiry with Yulin is that the Khoisan people are from Japhet. They're not Bantu. They're not Negro. And they are not, they're kind of paler of skin actually than the typical Negro, but they're not pale skin, if you understand the slight difference I want to make. But they entered down into sub-Saharan Africa at a time that they ought not to have. So it was not for them a promised land. It was the same with Canaan. Canaan went into that land that was called the land of Canaan, but which was not allotted to Ham. And that's in part why Canaan was expelled from that land and Israel was given it in his place. So the Khoisan people went down into far southern Africa at a time when there was no sort of leave for them to do that. because at best it would have been land given to Ham, or presumably given to Ham. But in any case, it wasn't for them promised land. I leave that to one side. That is a kind of an interesting discovery I made fairly recently. But as I mentioned the term Bantu, I need to just mention where that term comes from, because I saw some recent upload on YouTube by somebody who was still, they're still confused as to what that term even means. I've explained it in the book, I think The Appointed Time, and I explained it in a fairly recent video upload as well. Bantu comprises a prefix. That word prefix is ba, which means the house of, and the suffix is into. That suffix into is actually Kemetic in origin. In the Kemetic, it's NTR. The letters NTR would be the Latin, Roman, English equivalent of what is there in the Kemetic hieroglyphics. And NTR, because they also didn't bother too much with vowels, like the Hebrew. NTR is the etymological origin of the English word nature. Take the English word nature, remove the vowels, and you get NTR. And its meaning in the Kemetic is actually God, with a small g kind of God, because nature was, seen as comprising, all kinds of different gods, small g, and the plural in the Kemetic would be Neteru, the gods, Neteru. Anyhow, so Ba plus Inter, so Ba Inter literally means the house of those people who are gods. That's what Ba Inter means. And with a little bit of, phonetic drift, it becomes Ba Intu or Bantu. So the meaning etymologically of Bantu is the house of those people who are gods, which precisely is what describes the Negro. The children of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, described also at Psalms 82, verse 6, I have said ye are gods, and the children of the Most High. So the Bantu people of sub-Saharan Africa, that's just another word for saying Negro. I'm sure those two words are used more or less interchangeably. Okay, so that's where the word Bantu comes from. And that's just a little throw to one side kind of a footnote. And that's where I would like to end this presentation on the Negro salvation, the battlefield of the mind. Okay, so with that, I give all praise, I give all thanks, I give all glory unto the Most High God, Yahweh. And to all those still listening, I say, Shalom.